Good morning, everybody, and I am so excited to share this with you. And as I was thinking about this over the last couple of days, I just said, there's nobody better to give this presentation. And I'll say that, I don't say that out of ego or arrogance, but nobody better to give a presentation on the evils of drug use in a recovering addict, right? As a recovering, task-focused jerk, I think, and I don't say recovering, I'd say evolving. I think I'm really qualified to tell you about how important understanding people are to your ability to have influence as a leader. So I'm really excited to talk with you guys today. What I want to do, this is what we're going to do today. My background, just real quickly, I spent over 26 years in the Army, and mostly about half of my time in special operations in the Army's Ranger Regiment, and then also in light and conventional infantry units. That culminated really what you see, that picture on the bottom there is my battalion that I commanded in Hawaii in the 25th Infantry Division. And I deployed that unit to Afghanistan, to Eastern Afghanistan. And I'll talk a little bit about the significance of that in just a minute. After I retired in 2013, I started working for the Army on programs that were designed to look at how we could improve soldier, leader, and team performance. So that was where I kind of got my start in really developing programs, specific programs for the Army in order to make better leaders and teams. And that's where I got introduced to what I'm going to talk to you about today. And really my mission, guys, and what I came out of the Army understanding and what I came out of this battalion command understanding is, leadership is different. When you're in a special operations unit, you have to lead by example. That's the most important thing that you can do. When you lead a regular unit of ordinary people, this unit I commanded was just a regular conventional, we call them straight leg, no airborne designation, they weren't paratroopers or anything special, but we built a team where people really felt like they were something that was larger than themselves. They felt special. I still have soldiers. That was 8 years ago that I left command of that organization. I still have soldiers come back to me and say, I've never belonged to an organization that had that kind of feeling of esprit de corps and things like that. And so what it's taught me is that I think everybody, my belief is that every human being wants to belong to something larger than themselves. And that's kind of my mission, is to help people achieve that goal. What I want to do today, and it's so funny because I'm a detail-oriented person. We'll see that as we go through. And I was like, well, I'll just hit the wave tops. And I think I told Emerald originally we're going to talk for like 30 minutes and have a 30-minute discussion. But I'm so detail-oriented that there's so many things I want to share with you today. It's just a really deep subject and I could talk all day on it. Usually this seminar goes about all day when I did it for the Army, but we're going to wrap it into about 45 minutes. But I really just want to get you guys thinking. I want to stimulate thought and discussion. I want to give you a very brief overview. I'll apologize up front if I kind of skim through some things briefly because we just got to watch the time, but I'm always available. I told Emerald, I said, if she's willing to leave the chat room open or the Zoom open after 10, I'm willing to stick around as long as you guys have questions or want to talk. But most importantly, folks, I want to enable you to be a better, and I'm going to say leader, teammate, spouse, father, mother, whatever it is. This tool has made me, in general, a better human being, and I'm really excited to share that with you today. So let's jump into it. But before we do, I got two questions I just want to put in your head, and as we go through this today, I want you to kind of think about it. And the first one is, I think back to my Army time, and the Army spends, and any organization spends a lot of resources on training their people, whether that's technical skills like PowerPoint or, Lean Six Sigma black belts or whatever those technical skills are that we want to have our people do. We spend a lot of time on training on diversity and equality and sexual harassment and all those different things. But my perspective is we don't spend a lot of time on teaching people. How much do we spend and invest in learning how to understand ourselves and our people? So that's kind of the first question I would put at you in your own life, in your own organization. How intentional are you being at learning to understand yourself and other people? And then the real thing that's really interesting is as we go through and talk about this, I want you to try to relate what we're talking about to people that you know and who has been the hardest to lead or to work with and why. Okay? And then first thing we're going to do, I always like to start off with a little mental gymnastics to warm everybody up. But there's a purpose in this. And ordinarily I'd hand out these little pieces of paper, but we'll adapt to the COVID lockdown situation. So what I want you to do, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. And I want you to try to count from 1 sequentially up as high as you can go. So go 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up. And I want you to find those numbers and see how high you get. Okay, so I got my watch right here, and ready, set, go. Got 15 seconds left. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. And stop. So we're not going to open up all the unmuted thing, but I'm just curious, how far did you get? Be honest. You know, did you get up to 8? Did you get 9? Did you get 3 or 4? So we're going to do this again. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add some structure to this. I'm going to draw a line, and if you had your paper, I'd ask you to draw a line vertically, and then we're going to draw a line horizontally. And what the pattern that we're looking for is, the 1 is in the upper left quadrant, okay? The 2 is in the upper right quadrant, and you kind of start to see the pattern now, right? 3 is in the bottom right, 4 is in the lower left, and then again, 5 goes up and around and around. So basically you're going in a clockwise direction to find those numbers. You know all the numbers. The next number will be in that different quadrant that I just showed you, okay? So now we're gonna do this again. I'm gonna give you 30 more seconds, and I want you to see how high you get knowing the pattern we just discussed. Okay, ready? And go. About 15 seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. So did everybody get a lot higher? Did you double the amount of numbers you could find knowing the pattern? Well, that's what I would tell you guys, is that what we just experienced is the power of knowing the pattern, which allows us to know what to expect and how to get a better result. And I will tell you that the same holds true for people in our lives, in our workplace, and all of those different things. When we become aware of the pattern of how we communicate, how they communicate, not only do we know what to expect from them, we know how to adjust our communication styles and get a better connection, which is what it's all about. And I'm going to finish this presentation with a sentence or a phrase or a quote from one of my heroes that talks about how important connections are. So when you know the pattern, and that's the point of this whole thing, is we can be intentional about understanding how people are different, how we are, how they are different from us, and how we can meet them at their level to make better, deeper connections, okay? So let's jump into it. The first thing I'm gonna say is, you know, these type of things, there's a lot of them out there, guys. You know, these are some of the ones that I could find yesterday, just putting this thing together. The Colbier, the Clifton Strength Finders, the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI is also called, 16 personalities, Enneagram, the DISC, of course, all of these different things. And I don't want to badmouth any of them. I've taken, and that's as part of my work in the Army, I said, okay, this is a good idea. We're going to learn how to understand ourselves and know people better. Now, which one is the best fit for the Army? And so I looked at almost every single one of these assessments. I took Myers-Briggs 3 times in the Ranger Regiment. I did the Colbier. I have the Strength Finders 2.0 book, and I refer to it all the time. And so my point is this: you can learn something from all of these. But what I found to be the most useful is the DISC. And these are the 2 systems that I use. The one is the John Maxwell DISC method. And I like that one because it's a really easy to understand report. It's a good report. It's a little bit more people friendly, easy to understand, relates to people a little bit better. It only covers the behaviors, so I say it's a great starting point. My personal favorite, and what I use the most, and particularly with the Army, whenever I do this work with the Army, I use the TTI Success Insights Trimectris DNA. And what that gives you is the 3 different sciences in one assessment, but I use primarily the 2, and the DISC behaviors, which is how you do things and how you prefer to do things, and then the driving forces, which is your motivators, or what gives you energy, or why you do things, And this is why I believe in this assessment. So we could have the same exact DISC report, but if our driving forces are different, and I just ran into this situation when I was debriefing a captain in the Minnesota Army National Guard, was his DISC was almost exactly like mine. His driving forces were completely different. We did things completely differently. And so it's really important to understand that. Now, we're only going to talk mostly about the DISC today. I'm going to briefly cover the driving forces, but I think the DISC is a good starting point. And the TTI Trimetrics DNA gives you really graduate level insights into people and others. So there is no right or wrong style. You know, that's kind of the things. And I'm going to tell you, I mean, I always jump to that conclusion. I'm like, well, I'm a DC, you know, I'm dominant and I'm detail oriented. So if you're a people person and you're not detail oriented, you must not be that good, but that's wrong. We all have our styles. They all have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. We all have things that we could try to balance. And that's one reason why I'm not a particular fan, even though I've used it and I use it. The Clifton Strengths Finders and the Colbier, those assessments tend to focus on what you're really good at. Two reasons why I'm skeptical of that. It's my nature, number one. But number two is I believe I've learned more from I believe that we all have to kind of grow our weaknesses. We leverage our strengths, but we grow our weaknesses to be better leaders. And the other thing is, I just don't think you can work to your strengths all the time, which is kind of a central principle of, hey, in a perfect organization, you will let all of your people work to their strengths. I've never been in a perfect organization where we can do that. I've had jobs where I have to be a people person, or you know, or if you're not a detail-oriented person, you have to have details. And I'll talk a little bit about some case studies with that I've ran into. So, but all styles can be successful leaders and teammates, particularly when they understand how others are different from them and they're more accommodating or understanding of those differences. And then all styles, and the most important thing is adaptation is absolutely something that's part of this. And you'll see that in some of the graphs that I'm going to share with you here in just a minute. Okay, so what is DISC? It's really, it measures you on some things. So the first thing that we look at is whether you have a task or goal focus, okay, or a people and relationship focus. And then there is whether you're kind of outgoing or whether you're reserved. And this is, I just mentioned why. And see, I did a lot of self-searching on what assessment is good. MBTI, I am an introvert, INTJ, if you're familiar with that assessment. But I'm not an introvert and Emmer will tell you this, I will talk your ear off. I am not an introvert when it comes to talking about things that I am passionate about, like this. So, and then if you look at my DISC, which I'll show you in just a minute, I'm a DC. So by that, I'm outgoing and reserved. And that's where I get the translation of, yes, I'm outgoing when I'm focused and talking about a task or a passion, but no, I do not like to go to parties. If you watch me at a First Tuesday coffee, I'll be standing in the corner looking uncomfortable until we start getting going on the business at hand, because that's my thing, okay? So just an example. So here's how it's rated. How you respond to problems and challenges, that's your D. Your I is how we respond to people in contact. Your S is your steadiness, you respond to pace and consistency. And then your C is procedures and constraints. The C, this is where I'm a C, and I just chafe under this title. They say compliance. I don't ever consider myself compliant. I like to think of myself as conscientious or detail-oriented. So, and then the measurement is done like this. It's done on a scale. You see the energy line going across the middle, and so from 0 to 100, you'll see a score on there. And then wherever it falls on that scale, so let me show you, I'll pop that up there. I don't know if you can see it, if your chat window, if all the people are in the right side like mine are, you might not be able to see it. But that's a typical score. And actually, this is my adapted scale. So you see, I am very driven or dominant. I tend to be task focused. I tend to be faster paced or prefer a faster pace. And I tend to be detail oriented. Okay? So now this chart is an eye chart. I didn't want to put it on here, but I really like it because if you take, I think Emerald said she's going to share these slides with everybody. If you take nothing away, this is a great one to cut out and have in your pocket or your notebook when you're dealing with people, because you can kind of take a look at this and say, okay, this guy's a D. You know, these are the things, how you do it. You can kind of do a quick assessment of them. But each one of these, and we'll go through these in in a little bit more detail, but this is how it works out. And I'll just use one example. So if you look at the D, you look at if they're high on the scale, you know, you can label them, or they tend to come across, or they tend to think of themselves as ambitious, driving, decisive, and venturesome. Other people who are different than them, however, may perceive high Ds to be overly aggressive, overly demanding, overly bossy, overly confrontational. So, you know, I look at low Ds. Well, I could look at them as, man, that guy is really submissive, or he is really hesitant. He just doesn't take charge. But that's not fair, okay? Cooperative, they just don't like conflict. That's part of what they do. They don't, like, I love conflict, verbal conflict. I love good, honest debates, and I think we're better. A lot of people don't do that. So just wanted to share that with you as a tool that you can use, okay? And the most important thing is that we all exhibit all 4 behavioral factors in varying degrees of intensity. And these are actual graphs that I pulled out of reports. I'll leave the bottom right one for the last, because that's the best. It's my favorite. But upper left, if I can, and this is what I always liken this to the Matrix, when, you know, when what's his name? Keanu Reeves, but he could see the numbers flowing through people. I liken it to that. You can see the Matrix when you see somebody's graph. You're like, okay, this guy on the left is not, he doesn't like conflict. He likes people. He's a great teammate. He's kind of hesitant. He may resist change, but he's a great teammate. Everybody loves him, but he's going to run afoul of me because his detail orientation is an 8, and he's just going to run afoul of me. But nice guy, I'm going to like him. I just may be frustrated with him in a work environment. In the top right, this guy is a buddy of mine. He was just a brigade commander in Hawaii. And I was always a little bit envious of his ability to connect to his soldiers. I didn't have it. But when I look at his graph, I'm like, well, now I get it. He's a people person where I'm not. And that's one, and he's also a S over the energy line. You remember mine was below it. And that's a great teammate. He's very good at building small teams, and he's got the people focus that can connect with them on that level. I was a little surprised at his lower C, though, because he seems to be very detail-oriented, but I never worked for him, so maybe I was wrong on that. In the lower left, this guy is really kind of slow-paced, but he's super detail-oriented. This is a person that you want to take something, and when you want good analysis done on it, he may not be able to turn it in a hurry, but that's who you want. And in fact, this was a graph of an executive officer for a battalion commander who wanted to kill his XO because this guy hit to him, he was way too slow and couldn't keep up. And when I showed him the value of somebody with these kind of analytical skills and asked him to look at when he might be able to give him more time to do the analysis, it was a great relationship. And then the bottom right, this is my kryptonite, if you will. So off the chart social, always wanted to talk, flitting around, going from one social event to the next, zero detail orientation. If you remember my scale of high D, high C, you can see probably a lot of conflict potential there, right? Well, guess who this is? This is my wife. So when I got this and we did this assessment, it was like the light bulb came on. And before, and this is why I share this with you guys, where I always assumed she was doing this to just drive me crazy. Now I understand, and this has been a great conflict resolution in our house, because when she does this, I'm like, hey, look, she's not doing it deliberately. This is her DNA. This is how she's hardwired. Now, I like to think my wife could bring her detail orientation up a little bit, and that's our conversations that we have. And I try to be more people focused. So when she's trying to get us out in a block party, in fact, every Friday night we come out in our cul-de-sac and we sit 6 feet apart and we just socialize with our neighbors. Well, Debbie's always planning that all week, and she's telling me on Friday, hey, we're going to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I got to cut the grass and I've got to do this and that. I resist. But when I get out there, we have a good time. And I've really gotten, that's one of the benefits of the COVID thing, is I've gotten to really know and love some neighbors that we've never see each other. So here's the wants of the different styles. Okay, D's want results. I's want recognition. S's want relationships. C's want to be right. And I can tell you that's, as a high C, I got some great advice when I was a young lieutenant saying, Dan, pick your battles more carefully. I didn't understand that till I've done this. 40 years later, 20 years later, I'm like, now I understand. I have to be right. And so if I see something that I think is wrong, I'm going to fight that battle, even though it probably is going to piss off some I's and some S's. And so that was some great advice I got that I couldn't appreciate. So real quickly, guys, we'll go through these. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but again, the D's, higher D's will assertively accept problems. Low D's will challenge in a conservative manner, and they really want to avoid conflict, okay? You see, just start in a circle. You see, and I love these. These are great little cards to have. So D's, their fear is to lose control or being taken advantage of. They have a strong ego, so you can have, if you got two high D's, and I had a high D, high I working for me, and we would bump heads all the time because he had a strong ego, and even though he didn't have the experience, he still wanted to be in control and be out front because of that D. Okay? So here's their strengths and limitations, or as I like to say, these are the things they kind of see in themselves, but here's how other people who are different from them may see them. All right? Here's your I. People focus. And if you're a low I, like I am, I mean, this skeptical and logical, it's all about both of those things for me. High I's will trust people kind of innately, immediately, without any reserve. I'm like, you got to prove yourself to me before I allow you to, before I start to give up some of the control that my high D. It's really interesting. So when I read this report, it was like home run, home run, home run. And it's something I can make sense of when I start comparing actions that I've taken in the past. Here's your things for the I. Here's their strengths and limitations. I mentioned that trusting others too quickly. Lack follow through. Oh my gosh, my wife is horrible at that. In fact, sometimes I think she just comes up with great ideas and lets me do the follow through. That's why she's enabling my high C and my high D. I had to throw this in here as a low I. My wife loves this. So that's me on the left, and that's my wife on the right. And I'll apologize up front to any high I's in the room. So here's your S. Again, steady pace, good teammate, kind of resists change, but likes a steady pace and is really a good, he or she likes, they really are good at small team and building relationships over time and deep connections, high S's. And what's funny is most of the studies that have been done, like 60% or more of the population are primary S's. So their highest factor is an S, which is really interesting to me. Here's their things. And I love this slide. I borrowed it from an Army presentation we gave. If you look at the bottom and don't in the top, all of those things it says about an S, I am guilty of all of this. I'm on the move. I'm a high D. I'm always going. I'm going. I want to make a decision. I want the detail. And the S's are sitting over there and they're not saying anything because probably I'm moving too fast for them. I'm threatening change and all these different things. And I try to remember, I'm like, hey, look, if somebody's not saying, I will go back later and go, and out of that pressure cooker environment in a meeting or something, whoops, I did it, I'm sorry. And I'll say, hey, what do you think? And try to give them time to do it in their own speed. And I think this is a great thing to remember about our S's. And again, if they're 2/3 of our teams, there's a lot of knowledge out there and there's a lot of insight and wisdom that we're not getting as leaders if we don't allow them to say what they want to say in their own time. Okay. Here are their strengths and limitations. This might be an S in one of your meetings. And I'm sorry, I keep touching my Apple Magic Mouse and it just jumps forward. So here's the C. I am a rule follower. I have to admit that. I like to think I'm a rule breaker, and I do challenge and stretch things for all these other reasons in my disc profile and my driving forces. But I am a rule follower when I come to it. My wife is a low C. In fact, I kind of refuse to drive with my wife when she's driving, because sometimes she just doesn't want to, and this makes sense now. She doesn't think rules are made for her, like speed limits and, you know, safe distance to follow people and things like that. It's kind of funny. Here are the fears and the strengths and all those things of your high Cs. Now, remember, what you do is you put these together in whatever the factors are, the combination of 4. So for like me, I don't want to lose control, and I'm afraid of criticism. And so what that drives me to do is that what that produces is an extremely high standard of expectations for both myself, my work, and others. That's what the combination of a DC is, which is good. It served me well in the military, but it's also bad because a lot of times many people can't meet the level of expectations or the standards that I set. So we just have to be aware of that. Strengths and limitations of a high C. Perfectionist, that's me. And I'm always, even when I make a decision, in fact, I had a young guy working for me one day in Iraq, and he said, "Sir, you always change your mind." I put out some guidance, and I told him, I said, "Okay, here's your task, is to keep track of my decisions, and when I contradict myself in another one, you can throw it out there, and I will backtrack if I do that." But what I've come to realize is, as somebody who is a data gatherer, I'm always looking for new data to make me think that I made a mistake. And that's that perfectionist side. And so you're always reevaluating. Now, my argument to people in the military is, isn't that a good thing? You know, you make a plan, it's a bad plan, and then things start to go badly for you once you're out there amongst the enemy and shots are being fired. Well, I would hope that you would reevaluate the conditions on the battlefield and adjust your behaviors. But it can be, if it's something you do all the time, it can be hard for people to work for you because they're never quite sure if they've met the standard or if you're going to change your decisions based on conditions. So this is what happens when you have too many of the same style. So I love this card. This is one that I tell people when I give debriefs to cut this out, laminate it, you know, put it in your notebook or whatever. This is what gives you the ability to kind of be in there. And if you start watching people, and that's what I do, I'm always trying to read the matrix, if you will. So when I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, okay, that person's a high I. That person is a super C, super detail oriented. He's not, you know, he's reserved, and he seems like he's just moving at a slow pace, and he's kind of resisting this. Let's go get him. Let's go get him. And that way you can adapt your communication to connect with them and to reach them in a way that they get. And so guess what? People will do things when they believe in it. And if you connect with them on their level, they're going to be more willing to do what you ask them to do. Your influence increases, right? So just an example, you know, and this, I don't know if you kind of get it yet, but the red color is a D, the yellow is an I, green is the S, and the purple is the C. So I was debriefing a young captain who was getting out of the Army the other day. He's a Ranger, and he was a high I. His highest factor was an I. He was really, and I don't know if I have his thing in here later. I'll show it to you. But he's an ISC, which is a really cool combination to have. But so when I was doing his debrief, my normal thing is to say, we go into these paragraphs that kind of describe your behaviors, and mine is like to the point, agree, disagree, modify. But based on this analysis of his high I, it says ask feeling questions to draw their opinions or comments. So instead of saying, do you agree, do you disagree, I'd say, how do you feel about what this says? And it worked really well. He really opened up. And then at the end of it, I said, as we were talking about this, I said, Pete, did you notice I've been asking you how you feel about things? And I said, this is why. I said, I've adapted my communication style to connect with you on a deeper level. And he was like, wow, that's really powerful. And he was like, it really worked. So anyway, I share that with you guys. I hope it's helpful. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of the behaviors, which are how you carry out your action. how you prefer to communicate, how you prefer to be communicated to, they are really observable, and that they're really a lot easier to understand and to see and to kind of read the matrix on people. Now, driving forces are a little bit more fuzzy, a little bit more nebulous. They're why you do what you do, what drives you to action, what gives you energy. And because that they're not outward manifestations, they're a little bit harder to see. And so it's a little bit, that's why, again, this whole idea of looking at why people do what they do, what gives them energy, what drives them to action, is an important facet of not just understanding your people's behaviors, but why they do it and how you reach them on a level that they respond to willingly and, you know, in a gung-ho manner. So we're going to touch briefly on this. I chart here, you know, so what this is a scale. This is a typical scale for somebody. It's they look like the high score, so maybe they're top 4 primary clusters. These are the 4 things that influence people the most. In fact, this is mine. This is my primary cluster. You can see that I am a person who at most is always driven by new ideas. So when you come to me and you say, hey, Dan, we got this problem and we want to look at new solutions for it, I am already energized to get onto that. That's the number one thing that I am motivated by. What's interesting is I'm highly altruistic and I'm highly selfless, which what that translates to is I won't tell people no when it comes to volunteering, because I just want to be helpful and I don't expect any personal return. And what's funny is because my high DC, I'm a kind of a, you know, I can come across as arrogant, demanding, perfectionist, a jerk. But deep down, I'm really not. I'm there to be helpful. I don't want anything personal. I don't want recognition. And I want people that have a harmonious experience. So it's really funny how people can misperceive me, who I truly am. But I'll talk about that. It doesn't matter how I really am. It only matters how they perceive me. So you see on the right-hand side, it just gives you a little bit of a description of either, you know, basically what they do is they measure you at some point on a spectrum of a continuum of 6 different areas. You see them: knowledge, utility, surroundings, others, power, and methodology. You see the descriptors of either end of the spectrum. And that's about as far as we'll get into that today. And then this is a good, just putting it all together, a good case study of how you put them all together and why it matters. So on the left-hand side, I had these captains from the minute. I'm a coach up at Fort Irwin for the Army 1 week a month. I coach company commanders, captains. And these guys came to me and they said, hey, this one on the right came to me and said, hey, you know, I was talking to him about this thing, because I saw the conflict going on. And I was like, Jordan, talk to me about the team and the relationships. And I started talking about, hey, you know, how are your people and what do they do? And and he said, hey, I want you to work with us. And he reached out to me and said, we want to do this. So kudos to the guy on the right for saying, hey, I probably have some work to do at understanding others. But anyway, you see this guy on the right, he's pretty much, in fact, this is what I was telling you about. His disc is pretty much like mine. He's a DC. What's funny is my S naturally is above the energy line, and then I've dropped it over the years with my Army time, which is all about managing chaos. So that's one reason why my adapted style, my S is below that. But anyway, he's almost exactly the same. So people, I just be honest, people do not like working for me sometimes and do not like working for him. It's compounded when you look at his teammate on the left, who is social. He's slower paced, he resists change, and again, this is where I always focus on. The detail orientation is where he was really failing. He just could never meet the expectations of his DC boss. So just a great idea. And then what also compounded that was, if you look at their driving forces down at the bottom, they both have commanding motivators in their primary cluster. It means they're in their highest 4 scores. And so what you wanted from the guy on the left wanted to be in control of his own destiny. He wanted to get recognition for what he did. And the guy on the right would never give it to him because he wasn't meeting the standards of his expectations. So that's just a good example of how being able to read people and really see and understand. And so what they're working on is the guy on the right is working on trusting the guy on the left more. And the guy on the left is working on saying, hey, my boss is detail oriented. I have to, if I want my own control over my own personal freedom, I've got to give my boss enough detail that where he trusts me that I'm going to meet his standard. And what I also recommended to the guy on the right was get what I call, when you line navigate, you get an azimuth check with your compass. And I always used to say, get azimuth checks early and often. So come back into your boss and go, boss, am I meeting your intent? Am I achieving the standards that you think I need to be setting for this project? And then let him, if it's good, let him go back out and run. And if it's not, then you sit him down, you go, no, I want it more like this. And that worked really, really well for me. So just a good example of how you can use this. Okay, now I see we're at about 40 minutes, Emerald, so doing good. Here's my final thoughts, guys. I say this all the time. Again, it kind of evolved from what I was taught by General McChrystal, retired McChrystal, if you know who he is. He's the one that kind of said, hey, Dan, pick your battles a little bit more carefully. People's impressions or perceptions of you are a series of limited snapshots. Make sure that the snapshots they have of you are the right ones. That's evolved in my brain, and my teaching point to people is perception is reality. And in fact, Emerald and I were talking about this the other day with the police and all the sadness going on in the country right now, where it doesn't matter what the police's intentions are. If we perceive them as to being cracking skulls and jackbooted thugs, you're never going to win that war of perception. And we got to figure out ways to change those perceptions. But it doesn't matter who you think you really are. It doesn't matter if I think I'm altruistic and selfless and I'm all about making great experiences and harmoniousness. If people perceive me to be a demanding, arrogant jerk, that's who I am, right? Misperceptions, these misperceptions that others have of us are the greatest source of conflict. They lower performance, and I'm doing a master's research project right now on the effects of leadership on employee engagement. And people negative engagement is going to plummet, or is going to skyrocket, if you will, if people think wrongly about you and they don't understand you and they don't understand why you do what you do. And then last thing is, if you know yourself, understand others and how they're different from you, we can start to eliminate these misperceptions and connect more deeply with our team, with whoever that is, whether our family team, our spousal team, our work team. And John Maxwell said this. Leadership is nothing more than influence. That's all it is. You're influencing people to accomplish something that you want them to do, right? He also said this, that connecting, if we all agree with it, leadership is influence, and you want to increase your influence, then if we can deepen our connections, we can deepen our influence, right? So with that, I will turn it back over to Emerald and open it up. And I guess I can stop sharing. That's what I'll do, just so I can click on my screen. Really anxious to hear what you guys think, what your questions are. If I said something you disagree with, as I said, I love verbal conflict. So let me know what you think. It could be different. Emerald, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, fantastic job, Dan. Thank you for that overview. That's always, really great to hear. And it definitely sparked some thoughts in the chat just now. I think Romy and I were trying to figure out what our bosses are and their personality type. So I think it can definitely help us all work better together. So we'll open it up now for any of you. If you have any questions, you can type those in the chat. I did see one come through earlier, so I'm going to jump back to that really quickly. And this is from Kate. She's asking, is it possible to have different profiles for different situations? She says she's a very confident and dominant at work, but not in that way at all in her personal life. And she says even at work, she has different profiles based on different situations. Or sorry, I think she's asking, can she? She wants to avoid conflict with people when it comes to work, but still be confident.
I think what's funny was, I'm sorry, I got started reading the chat window and I was looking at people's scores on their number thing. So I got distracted by a bright, shiny object. But I think I heard you say, Emerald, that she's asking is, can you have different behavioral style profiles in different environments? Was that accurate?
Yeah, and Kate, you're welcome to unmute your mic and jump in at any point too, to add to that.
Sure. So at work, I'm very confident. I'm very dominant. People are they're very surprised to hear I'm an introvert because I'm just I know my work. So is it possible to have different profiles?
Absolutely.
And then, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, just let me caveat that because you saw me do this, you just nailed something that, I'm going to guess that you are maybe, do you like people, Kate? Are you social?
No.
You're not at all?
I'm very close to your profile.
Oh, okay.
I would think.
Oh, interesting. Well, like what I was going to say was some profiles can manifest as a high D, particularly like if you're an ISC, which was I was telling you that Ranger captain I talked to the other day was. So that can manifest as a really dominant person as a high D if the roles are clearly defined. So that's when you said, in those situations, you can come across as dominant. So that's what I think, but it'd be really interesting to see your profile. But it's possible that you are, my guess is you're probably a D just over the energy line, and that gives you balance. It allows you to kind of go either way. But more importantly, you are self-aware, and then you realize like, hey, in different environments, I have to be a different style of leader.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or, thoughts as, this conversation, it does spark a lot of thoughts into this topic, for your respective businesses, how you guys deal with clients and how you deal with, people you manage or, who's managing you. So, whatever thoughts you guys have, feel free to put those in the chat. I am seeing one coming through from Tim. He's asking, is there a way to take a DISC assessment at a low cost or without being a part of an HR structure that is using it, and how he can go about getting his own profile? So maybe you can share a little bit on that, Dan.
Sure, guys. And I told you that I use two primary things. The John Maxwell DISC is a great starting point for that. And I'm able to offer that at a lower price point. And what I do is it's $99 for the John Maxwell DISC profile. And that includes the report, all the printing, and an hour-long sit-down session. And whether now we've been doing those via Zoom, but ideally it would be over a cup of coffee or something. But and then the TTISI is a little bit more in depth and a little bit more costly for me. And so normally what I do is about $299 for the same thing, but that comes with like a 3-hour session because there's a lot more material to go over. So what I'll do for this group, Emerald, I'll offer it for $50 if people want to take their profile, the John Maxwell DISC. And I'm happy to do the debriefs for those folks, and that can get you started on the whole DISC thing.
Yeah, and what we'll do for people to take you up on that, Dan, we'll just, I'll share your contact information after this event to our attendees. So if you guys have registered on our website where you dropped your contact information in the chat function today, I'll be sharing that with you after. We're going to have the recording for those of you that had popped in a little later, or if you'd like to share it with anyone that missed it, but we can make that special offer just for people on this call and that had registered, Dan.
Great.
So no trouble there. Yeah, any final thoughts before we head off? We want to make sure you guys have a chance to, get your questions answered.
Hey, Emerald, let me just add one other thing to what that question was. If you think this would work in your business, and you're not the decision maker to implement that, come give me a shout. Because what I can do is can give away some comp reports. I get a couple from the company. And if I can get somebody intrigued and show them the value of this, and maybe we can look at doing an organization-wide thing, I'd be happy to do that as well.
That's great. And now is actually a really great time to be looking into stuff like this too, with thoughts of people, returning back to work. You have to work on the culture that you fostered within it. So this is a really great way to, keep the productivity that's been going on over the past couple months with the remote work and bringing that back into the workplace. So that's another area where I can see this, really playing a lot of value. So thanks for that, Dan.
Sure thing.
But we'll leave it at that. If you guys don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and close out the call. We'll share the chat with you after, as well as the recording. And we'll make sure that you guys have Dan's contact info so you can stay in touch with him and hear about that special offer as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope that you'll join us for future Zoom events, and you guys can find out about those on the Chamber's website. But we hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Hey, I just have one request, Emerald.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, when you see me at a First Tuesday Coffee, just come over and talk to me because I'm lonely over there. I really am, but
You know, it's funny, and I'll leave it with this too. My personality type, I was raised to be really nurturing, and you know, so I like being a hostess, and I'm always looking for people in the room that are not talking to anyone to make sure they feel welcome. So you're always that type of person I'm looking out for. So I'll watch out for that next time, but I haven't seen that myself.
Yeah. No, that's what I said. Well, I'm trying to raise my eye, and I realize that that's probably not the way to make connections in a networking meeting, is to stand in the corner with your donut looking miserable.
Just stand by the food.
What's funny though, I'll share if I can. We got a couple of minutes left, Emerald, but when I went down to get certified as a John Maxwell coach, they had this big ballroom, and we're all standing in there, and they had dancers up on the, we got somebody in the witness protection program in here now. I like that. Remember I said, but anyway, so I'm standing there and they're playing music, like dance music, and there's cheerleaders up on stage, and looking around the room, it was so amazing to watch people. And, you know, half the room was dancing and up on the tables, shaking pom-poms. And then the other, like a third of us were standing there with our arms crossed, looking like we wanted. I almost walked out of the room because that's how much I just couldn't take the cheerleading and the sociability, you know, what they expected of us from the socialness. So it's really funny to see how, like when you go to your next coffee, start to do that, is look around the room and see who's just either standing behind their chair, you know, and you know, okay, you can kind of start to read their profile, and you can kind of start to know how to connect with them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this definitely, like I said, it sparked some conversations. The question you asked earlier, we can leave it with that too, as a reminder for you guys to ask yourselves and look inward and think about who you work well with and who you don't, and you know, who you manage well, or who you manage well by, and why. And so, you know, seek inward, look into yourself and look into why that is, but also, you know, pay attention to others around you and their behaviors, because, you know, like Dan said, it's very telling, and it'll help you guys work better together in the future and work with other people of those types too. So like you said, it's a pattern, Dan. And once you figure that out, it's really easy to identify, you know, as you're out there talking to people, if you're actively listening. So absolutely. Thank you for that, Dan.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure, guys. I really enjoy this.
Absolutely.
Just gives me energy.
Good. Well, thank you all so much again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and end the call. Like I said, we'll share this with you. Give us just about 1 to 2 business days to convert that video over. So thanks so much, and have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.
Bye, everybody.